What's up, guys, and welcome back to the podcast. My name is Robbie Cassidy, and today we're going to discuss what you can focus on in the off-season. Now, to break it down in a bit more detail, I'm going to talk about why an off-season is important for people, main problems I often see with people that are starting to plan their off-seasons and what they work on during their off-season, and then I guess what you can focus on at the start of it and as you progress through it, and when you start to get back into your pre-season, what you should be looking at. So reason being is I know a lot of championships are finishing when it comes to GAA. A lot of competitions are finishing with running and triathlons and all sorts of sports. Swimming I know is indoors, not too bad, but all sorts of sports are starting to finish up now. Rugby's only starting to get going really, but I want to give you an idea of what you can look at for the next couple of months before you get back into the sport to set yourself up as best as possible for that sport when you get back. Now, before I jump into that, I am just going to put out a small message that I will be taking on more clients over the next couple of weeks, especially as it's coming closer to Christmas. I know that's crazy to say that, and we're only coming up on Halloween right now. But the main people that I work with are people who have struggled with an injury for a couple of years or have an ongoing injury, and they are struggling to get back to the activities that they love, struggling to get back to sport, or just not able to play at the same level. Now, there may be a few reasons. They may be lacking confidence. The rehab that they've had in the past has been insufficient. It hasn't gotten back to the level they want to get back, or they may be fearful of re-injuring it. And that's a really common thing, fearful of re-injury or fearful of pain. So if that sounds like you, if you've had an injury and you just find it difficult to get over and you feel you've tried everything else, well, send me a message. We'll jump on a call, we'll talk through it, and if it's the right fit for us, or if we're both the right fit for each other, we will or get it sorted and we'll organise it and we can jump straight into that. If not, I'll give you a couple of ideas of what you can do to work on it, and you can go away for a few months and try those out. So easiest way to get in contact with me is I have a form on my Instagram. You can fill it out and it'll set everything up, or you could just send me an email at mobilityshooter@gmail.com, and either way you will get it set up as soon as possible. So some of the people I'm working with at the moment would have bulging discs causing them severe pain into their legs, or bulging discs that's just causing them pain in their back and it's been going on for a long time. Others may be hip injuries, hip labral injuries, knee injuries, or old knee injuries is stopping them getting back to running or sport. Other people have shoulder injuries. It's really varied, and to name them all out here, it'd take me a while, because some people come to me with 3 to 4 different injuries and they're just trying to get everything sorted before they get back into the season next year. So if it's something that you're interested in, let me know. We'll set it up and we will get you from where you are now to where you want to be. But to jump into this podcast, I guess the best way to start would be to discuss why an off-season is important, and why it is important to give your body time to recover and give your mind time to recover. So you'll see that, especially when COVID happened, that people who had, I'm going to look at GA here specifically for a second, when they structured a lot of after the league, when they structured a lot of the championships, some of the championships ran from 1 year into the next. So it ran from, let's say, whenever it was May, all the way down till June and July. And I know that specifically because in Clare, some of the championships, they played the final while the other championship was going on. So it was a bit of a mix up for people. They didn't really have an off season. Some people were just training non-stop and never getting a break from it. And I noticed a lot of clients that I have been working with, I should say, struggled with motivation and struggled to get or keep themselves going throughout the year, as they found that it was just dragging on, and one season led into the next, and they're just really looking forward to this off season. So an off season is important because it gives you a chance to, as I was saying, gives your body and mind a chance to recover, but gives you a chance to kind of reset your goals and to shift your mindset from focus to more of a relaxed mindset. Now, it is important to do that because it's the same with anything. You can't always push. You need to pull back at some times or at some stages. And if you don't do that, you're going to find yourself burning out. So I think it was a good perspective change, or a good I guess a change of perspective for people who have trained the whole year round, that it is important to take time away from your sport and enjoy other aspects of life, because if you don't do that, you'll be looking back on the years, and let's say if you did win something or you didn't win something, all the time that you missed out on other activities when you were just too focused in on that. So it is important to take your time, shift your mindset to something else, and try out new things. So I guess moving on from that into the main problems that I see with off-season work with athletes. Now this is going to be across the board. This isn't just specifically GAA, and I want to get that point across that it will be for everybody. But I do like to bring it back to GAA because first, a lot of people listening to this podcast are play GAA, whether it be sport, or it be football, hurling, camogie, handball, whatever sport it is they play. So I want to tailor it to that slightly, but it'll also be, there's a lot of runners that listen to this as well, triathletes that listen to this, rugby players. So I want to kind of make it varied as well. But in general, the principles are the same, and you see it across every sport. So I guess the main one that you see is people do little to nothing in their off season, okay, or they do too much. Now, doing both of them are as bad as the other, okay, and there's no point saying one is worse. But doing little to nothing in the off season will set you back a couple of months of training, and that what you could have improved on small things. If you're just sitting on the couch and watching TV and kind of going through the motions, going out drinking every weekend, doing nothing really that you enjoy throughout the winter, you'll find that when January comes and you have to get back into training, or December for some people, you have to get back into training, you're not going to be very motivated to get back into it first, because you'll just feel like it's going to be such a slog for the first 6 to 8 weeks, because you need to get yourself back to where you should be, because you obviously have done nothing over the winter. Now, that's a big issue that I see, is people just, once it stops, they cut off everything, they don't do it at all. Now, I've no problem, and this is what I recommend to all my clients as well, if they get knocked out of championship, or if they win, or whatever happens, is to take a week or 2 weeks to chill out and to do nothing, especially if you've been pushing hard for the last couple of weeks. So just do something that you enjoy instead. Don't be focused on training all the time. There is time for training, and you can get back into that. But if we just stick to that mindset of, right, this season's over, I'm going to do nothing at all, you'll find that when you're 32, 33, 34, 35, and you want to continue playing, it's going to get harder to get back into it. Okay, and you'll pick up small niggles along the way, because you just have let your body get back down, or get down to a poor state, I suppose, and then you're trying to build back up again after. So that's really, really important. I would say continue doing stuff throughout the off season, but just don't do nothing at all. Now the opposite is just as true with people who just, when they finish up, they hit the gym hard and they start going to it 5 days a week straight away from the day they get knocked out. And they're just training, they're doing runs, they're doing everything. They're trying to catch up on stuff that they lost out on the year before. Now, the main problem with this is that you're going to lose motivation to do this. And you will get physical or mental burnout as well. Now, there's some people that can push on with this, but it is important to take recovery periods and take time to reset and kind of realign why you're doing it and what you want to do in the off season. Just going from getting knocked out in championship to straight into training is not going to be beneficial for anyone, okay? And it is important to take time to reflect on it, because if you don't reflect on it, you're not going to see where you missed out on what you could improve on. So that is another big issue. Now, focusing on the wrong type of training, I guess this is kind of varied, because it's going to go against the point that I say later on. So I guess you could take it with a pinch of salt, in that focusing on the wrong type of training, in that maybe you just go and you start running 5Ks and 10Ks because you feel that your fitness wasn't good enough that year, and you want to get it back up to a certain level, and you do that throughout the whole winter until you get back into your preseason. Well, that's not going to be as beneficial, especially if it's a power sport you play or a field sport you play. Now, if you're a runner and you just continue running all the time throughout the winter at the same level that you did over the year, you're going to get burnout, and you're just going to have that mental fatigue, you're going to have physical fatigue, and in general, you're just cognitive, or just your motivation will drop. Okay, so it is time, even if you're only taking a couple of days off a week, it is important to do it. Now, wrong type of training is one that you can look at, is that a lot of people will focus straight in on just hitting hypertrophy as much as possible. Now, hypertrophy is muscle building for athletes, or well, it's muscle building for anybody. Now, if you just hit that hard and you just get yourself as big as possible, you're going to find when you get back into training, you're going to be at a higher risk of injury because you just got your muscles big and you didn't get them as strong, okay? Or you didn't get your body as strong. So that's why you want to find a balance between hypertrophy training and strength training during the off season. Now, the other issues that people, I guess, mess up on is that they'll get an injury late in the year and then they won't take the time to rehab that injury. So they'll never take the time to, I guess, get it right before the new season, and then they'll wait throughout because usually, like, what will happen is an injury will generally subside and that it will clear up because, as I always say, it'll heal to the state that you put it under. So if you just stop all your running and you stop any activity, then you go into the off season and you're just walking, you're not doing anything too severe or hectic. Once you get back at the same level you were before, there's a high likelihood that will kick up again. And you see it all the time with hamstring injuries or calf injuries or even Achilles injuries, is that people stop doing everything, and then when they get back to training, they never really built up the capacity to get back to the level they were at before. And because of that, the injury will flare up again. It will kick up again, or you'll re-injure the same area. So it is important to take care of injuries in the off season and as soon as possible as you finish up in season, so your fitness levels are still high and you can still get it back to the level that you want it to be at. And then you can look to, I guess, relax a small bit more and then work it into your prehab in the preseason. Okay, but just getting an injury and stopping altogether is the wrong option. So if you do know anyone that is doing that, make sure to let them know to avoid that. Or there's a massive possibility that they will miss out a lot of the start of next year or the middle of next year because they didn't take the time to take care of that injury. So they're the main ones. The other thing that I would say is that people don't focus enough on just getting a small bit of mobility and movement training in during the winter. Now, it doesn't have to be a lot, and a lot of the time you can fit it in with your gym sessions if you're going to be going back to the gym, or before your running sessions if you're going to be going back running. But making sure that you do take the time to do it and that you're not just waiting until, let's say, 4 or 5 weeks into the next season and saying, Jesus, I actually really should have worked on that earlier in the year. So if you do get back into the mobility and movement training early in your off season, you'll find that you'll feel a lot better throughout the off season, and you'll feel way better when you actually get back into this activity again. But you do need to set aside time to do it, whether it is to do it at home in the morning or the evening, after lunch, whenever, or if you just fit in 2 to 3 exercises before the gym. Whatever it is important to get it in. And if you start, it's the same as strength training. If you try start it right at pre-season again, well, then you're obviously starting a couple of weeks behind because the body isn't used to going into those positions. And the last one, and it kind of, as I was saying, it goes against that focused on the wrong type of training. I think people probably focus a small bit too much on the same task. And especially when you're an amateur athlete, I think you should change it up a small bit in what you do, just to give you a different perspective on what to do. So I think if you're just focused on your sport all the time and you never really try out any other activities or any other sports, you can get that burnout, that physical burnout, that mental burnout, lack of motivation, because you're just full hog all in on one thing. So it is important to look at other sports of what you can do. Now, if you are a runner, you might try rowing for a while. You might try triathlons where you're swimming or cycling. If you're a GA player, it might be something like that as well. I know other people have gone to do golf, handball. Other people have played squash. All these different ideas or all these different sports will help you when you get back to your sport again, and they'll give you a different perspective on it. And it is important to do that at times. As I said, the majority of the people listening to this are amateur athletes. So although you want to do your best in your sport, it is nice to try out other things as well. And so you have a better idea of what you really enjoy, because we can get stuck in just the same old habits, and sometimes it's important to change it up. Other options that I would suggest people try out, I think trying a martial art is a huge one. It's definitely good for building self-confidence. It's good for, it's in general, self-defense, but there's a discipline behind it as well, and there's a discipline behind individual sports that you won't find in team sports. So if you're always involved in team sports, I would recommend looking to an individual sport, and you'll find when you get back to a team sport, there's certain aspects of that individual sport that you will bring to it, certain mindset changes that you'll bring to it as well. You won't rely on other people as much to do the same or to do their job. You'll be focused solely on what you can do, and then what you can do to help other people do it. And a lot of the time when you're in a team sport, it's easy to get into the habit of blaming other people. But if you're in an individual sport, it's very difficult to blame other people for things that go wrong. So I would always say to change that. If you're in an individual sport, I would say look at jumping into a team sport for a small while, whether it be tag rugby, astro, soccer, whatever it is, for a small while, and get a different perspective on what it's like to be in a team sport, because that will also change your attitude towards it, and might change your training as well. You might move from more of an individual focused training to jumping in, having more of a community mindset, and then jumping in with other people a couple of times a week or once a week even, just to get build that social group and build that social structure around you as well. So there is benefits to both sides of it, and I would always say if you are an individual, look at a team sport for a small while, and if you're a team, look at an individual sport for a small while, just to change the focus. Now, to jump on to the last part of it, I want to talk about what do you focus on in the off season. So the very first thing that I will say to all of my clients when a season finishes up is that I think you should take a small bit of time and reflect on the season that's gone by. And this is really important if you want to look at what you can improve in your strengths, in your weaknesses, and in your game overall. So I would say reflect on your performance. What can you improve on? What were your weaknesses? Where did you fall back? And then also, what were your strengths? Jeez, I don't know why I said it like that. What were your strengths? And if you pick out maybe 2 to 3 areas in each, you can find out where you can improve. So it's very easy to, when I'm saying this now, when I say reflect, I mean literally take out a journal, write it down in a journal, as opposed to just thinking about it. It's a lot more effective if you write it in a journal, and you can come back to it at a certain time as well, or just write it on your phone. But if you do that, you'll have a better idea of what you can work on, the smaller things in the off season, because when the season comes around again, it can be hard to think about, well, I needed to get better at this, or I needed to get better at this. Now, and a lot of time people will just look at their main one, say, well, I was lacking speed last season, or I was lacking endurance, so I need to get better at that. But there could be other aspects of it. It could be that if you're a runner, that your race strategy wasn't as effective as it should be. If you're a GA player, it could be that your catching wasn't as good, your kicking wasn't as good, your bucking wasn't as good. You weren't using your bad leg, let's say, as much. You weren't doing any sidestepping or cuts. And if you don't, as I was saying, if you don't think back on it, it's very difficult to, work that into your preseason, work it into your off-season. But if you do think back on it, and you have an idea of what it is you need to focus on, it's very simple to work on that. So I would say take your time, reflect on that, take 5 to 10 minutes, and really, honestly, you'll see huge improvement in your performance in the next season if you take the time out at the end of this season to reflect on that. Now, another thing that you would look at is your injuries and weak points that you had throughout the season, and your body and in your mind as well. So were you nervous? Were you anxious? Were you preparing yourself properly? Did you have the right diet? Were you taking in enough water? All of these things. What were you doing to manage stress before a game? What was your week before the game looking like, or competition or event? Did you have any niggles or injuries that held you back from your best performance? Did you have anything that kept on flaring up, or any issue that kept on flaring up, and that you just put it in the back burner until the off season? Because a lot of the time people will have these issues. They'll have a recurring knee issue, or recurring ankle or hip or back issue, but they'll be able to get through the season. But then then it comes into the off season, they won't think about that again. So they will put it in the back burner until the next season comes around, and they'll find it's always just hindering them and always holding them back. And it's very easy to improve on these things in the off season, as opposed to actually trying to wait until it kicks up and then trying to improve on it in season. And issues you'll commonly see would be like Achilles issues, it could be hamstring issues. What I often see is people that have back spasms or back tightness or back pain, and they're finding it's just holding them back from performing because they can't train as many nights as they'd like to train, or after training they're just locked up for days on end. So these are the things I think you should look at back on. So what to improve on and what your strengths were, how to improve on it, and then injuries, weak points that you had throughout the season. Then off that last point, making sure that you take the time to rehab old injuries. So taking the time to actually go through a full program, and not just hitting it for, let's say, a week or 2 weeks until it feels that bit better, and then taking the time to prehab it in the preseason when you're coming back into it again. If you do it, or if you do that, what you'll find is you won't be as conscious of it when you go back into season. Your body will be more aware of handling that load and handling that capacity. And if you do take the time out, you'll fly through the season. But if you don't take the time, it can crop up at different times throughout the year. And it might be that you get away for the first 4 months, but then middle of the summer comes and then everything piles on, work piles on as well at the same time outside of training, different commitments that you have pile on, and you get fatigued and things just start to kick up again. So you don't want to miss out on the start, middle or end of your next season because you didn't take the time in the off season to clear things up that were going on in the background. So I would always say work on these areas and work on these weak areas. So knowing what they are is really important. And as I touched on before, if you have an old injury, if you have an injury at the end of the season, the worst thing you can do is just finish up, especially if it happened in the last game, because you'll be pissed off if you lost. If you won it, usually you'll take the time to rehab it, because you might have provincial championships coming up after that. But you don't want to finish up and then just taking a couple of months off after to do nothing, because that injury will just be in the background waiting for you to up your activity again. Now, as I said before, work on your weak areas, problem areas that crop up, and do take the time to go through them: cutting, jumping, landing, balance exercises. Your gym work then, I think it should be a nice mix of hypertrophy and strength work. Or if for you gain a lot of weight in the off season, or maybe you held a lot of weight this season, it could be a body comp at the start, that you're looking to just drop a bit of fat early in the off season so that you can maintain it, and then you can actually work on your hypertrophy and work on your strength after that. Now you can obviously mix the two of those together, but if you're carrying a significant amount of fat, it's probably best to drop that body fat percentage as much as possible, so you're not going into the next season with a very high body fat percentage and try to drop it in season then. Now you don't need to be ripped all off season. You definitely don't want to be like that, because there is an impact that would have on your performance as well. But just taking the time to drop that 2-3%, it will make it a lot easier when you actually get back into training again. And then adding a bit of muscle mass can always be good, because you have these satellite cells. So if you add it early in the season or in the off season, even if you do lose a bit of that muscle, because those satellite cells are there, you'll gain it back very, very fast. As I said, focusing on a different task or sport. So if you're an individual sport, you look for a team. If you're a team sport, look for an individual. Look to learn new skills, whether that be learning a new language. It could be learning a new skill in your sport, in another sport. It could be picking up an instrument. Whatever it is, keep the body and mind ticking over, so it's always doing bits and pieces, so that when you do get back into training, you'll be able to excel at it early on. Because if you can excel at it early on in the year, and you can keep that going throughout the year, you'll see huge improvements in your performance. But if it takes you the first 3 months to get into your flow again, well then obviously you only have, let's say, 3 to 4 months or 5 months, whatever it is after that, to perform and improve, or improve and then perform. So you do want to keep a good routine, and you do want to keep your mind focused on different tasks throughout the off season, so the body is taking over all the time. Then you're looking at exercising. You don't want to gain a lot of weight, obviously, but you don't need to be in perfect shape either. So just watch the diet, continue to exercise, continue to keep your activity levels high, and continue to keep a good routine, good, whatever it is. Keep good diet, keep good hydration, manage your stress better. The off season can be a good time to figure out what works well and what doesn't work well for you as well. And now you're obviously not going to be performing as much, but it does give you an opportunity to check out what foods work for you, what sleep schedule works, what stress management techniques work for you. And if you can get those right in the off season, you can make massive improvements when you get back into season again. And then, as I said, you want to work on your mobility all throughout. You want to really be doing it throughout the year. Now, you can have little breaks, and there's no problem with that. And there might be times of the year that you hit it really hard, that you have long sessions, 30 to 40 minute sessions, and times of the year that you only have 5-minute sessions. But you want to vary between it and continue working on it throughout the year. So hitting areas that need work, mixing it in with different rehab and prehab programs that you're going to be doing. And then I would also say, in the off season, enjoy it and play with it a small bit more. Mess around with calisthenics, whatever you want, whatever type of movements you want. Body weight movements, just basic mobility movements, maybe accessory movements that you're working on weak areas, but just play with it a small bit more and enjoy it. Because if you get to enjoy it in the off season, it won't be as much of a task to fit it in the preseason and during your season. So it's I guess it's the same. It's just building that routine to make it as easy as possible. But that is the majority of what I wanted to talk about today. I should leave that last point on, is if anybody doesn't know where to start with your mobility routine, just check out my website. I have a foundational mobility program on it, and you can download it, and it will just bring you through different exercises, and that's mobility, strength and breathing exercises. So check it out if you are lost and you don't know where to start with your mobility work. But that, guys, is everything I wanted to discuss today and everything I wanted to chat about. I just wanted to give you a different perspective on what to focus on in the off season, and not the same. Like, I didn't go into a massive amount of detail on the type of strength work you should do, on the type of hypertrophy work you should do, and gym work in itself. I wanted to give you a different perspective on the other things that you can focus on, like jumping in a different sport for a small while, like reflecting on what you had done in the past, like taking care of injuries early in the off season, as opposed to waiting until early in the preseason or late in the preseason or late in your season next year. So hopefully you took a bit from that and you have a different perspective on what you could do going forward. As always, if anyone has any questions on it, definitely send them on to me, and I will let you know what I think. And I'm delighted that people are doing that a lot more. People are sending me on messages from the podcasts, and it lets me flesh them out a small bit more with them and talk to them about it a small bit more, because there might be areas that I mentioned there and I brushed over and you'd like to hear more about it. So just send me a message on Instagram or send me an email at mobilitytutor@gmail.com, whatever's easiest for yourself, and we can chat about it. So yeah, I guess that's everything from me today. Please also, if you are listening to this on iTunes, it's a massive help if you can add a rating to it and add a comment under that, under the mobility experiments in iTunes. It really helps with promoting the podcast, and it helps, if you're liking it, what you want to see more of, and all of that. Also, subscribe to it on iTunes, on YouTube, and on Spotify. I will be building YouTube more over the next couple of months, so definitely jump on that, Mobility Tutor on YouTube, and I'll be adding videos to it soon. But other than that, the last thing I would ask, actually, guys, is if you would please share it on your story, any episode that you enjoy, because it gets it out there that bit more, and it gets it out to more people who may enjoy the podcast, who may be looking for something, like who are struggling with injuries or struggling with whatever, and share it with a friend. If you can do that, or all of those, you'd be helping me quite a bit. So hopefully that is, I guess that's all for now. Also, lastly, anyone who is having trouble and wants to look for help getting over a recurring injury, just send me an email or a message or whatever's easiest for you. Fill out that form on my Instagram and we can jump on a call and discuss it in a bit more detail. But that's all from me. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope everyone is doing well. They're looking forward to winter, that you've plans made. But yeah, thank you all very much, and I will chat to you all again soon. Have a good one.